The sermon I promised you guys, enjoy. So I promised everyone that I will do the sermon, and I'll cover as much as I can, and I'll try and make it as brief and as simple and as digestible as possible. So then, the sermon is the religion that Christianity once was, and the relationship that it's called to be now through mediation by Jesus Christ. So then, the foundation really for this comparison is the terms and conditions for the Old Testament and how that was averted or done away with in the New Testament. And so, we will begin to dissect it bit by bit, but we need to start from the beginning. And I believe we all know the beginning is the beginning of it all, which is in Genesis. And so, in the beginning, when God created earth and everything therein, especially man, God had in mind a relationship with mankind. God had in mind communion and sharing of love and affection and freedom, because where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. That was the initial intention of God. Well, when God created man, he had in mind only good things for mankind. But unfortunately, we all know how that went. Man was warned not to partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And unfortunately, that is exactly what happened. And so man fell. So I guess we'll pick it up from there, the fall of man. And so all this abundance that God had in mind for man, all that was averted because of this one deed of partaking of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so I take my portion of scripture from Genesis 3, verse 23 and 24. Forgive me if I use a lot of Jehovah God, because this is the Bible I'm using. It's the one that's here at the office, and I believe the owner of it was indeed Jehovah's Witness. So this is New World Translation. I believe this is a JW publication. So then, 3 verse 23. With that, Jehovah God expelled him from the Garden of Eden to cultivate the ground from which he had been taken. So he drove the man out, and he posted at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubs and the flaming blade of a sword that was turning continuously to guard the way to the tree of life. And so, what happened here is that these people were expelled. Oh my God. Is this the work of the devil? How does my phone fall like that? There's some deep cracks on my phone. Was it? Okay, so yeah, so then what happens is that these people were expelled from the garden pretty much. So their expulsion meant they would forfeit the benefits that were there prior to them eating of the fruit, the benefits of abundant life, the benefits of eternal life or immortality, and the benefits of a relationship, an intimate relationship with God. And because of what they did, sin had entered the world through their deed, the deed of one man. And as a result of their sin, all of us were damned. And whatever punishment befell them, whatever wrath of God was as a result of what they did, was not only applicable to them. The God of the Old Testament was no joker. He visited the sins of our forefathers, and even us who would still come ahead would still be accountable for those sins that we knew nothing about. And so, what it is that we were now all born sinners because of what Adam and Eve did. And since then, Christianity was now turned into a religion There was no room for relationship with God. There was no room for any of that. There was no room for error. There was no room for playing games. There was no room for your feelings. Nothing like that. It was about what God wanted at that time, and it would be executed there and then. Failure to which consequences would follow like instantly. If at all he would delay, it was because someone else is interceding and being like, oh Lord, have mercy on them, wait upon them. But no, he didn't take nonsense pretty much. So then, you see examples of this hardcoreness when the flood came. Like he created us as human beings, and the will to sin or not to sin would mostly be overpowered by the will to sin because of human nature. And it was very hard to not sin, And given at that, there was no law at that time. The only law that was passed was for the tree of life not to be tampered with, and that one law was broken. But prior to Noah and them, there was really no law, you get. So God was punishing people for things they did not know were unlawful. How fair is that? And when you think about the flood, people died. Babies died. Elderly people died. Everyone died except for like a handful of people. That doesn't sound too godlike, does it? When you think about Sodom and Gomorrah, there was still no law. People died. Babies died. Elderly people died. Whoever. There was no age difference or whatever. People died. Like people legit died. Except for a handful of people. And those handful were really spared because they had a task ahead to carry on this timeline of the progression of the gospel. So then, even then, that nature isn't really godlike. It's godlike if you want to associate it with power and sovereignty and authority, perhaps then. But that's more religious than it is anything else. And, when the law, and in fact, even before the law itself came, when you look at Egypt suffered mercilessly at the hands of God just because Pharaoh wouldn't let the Israelites go. Babies died, obviously, because of the famine and the diseases that were there. Babies were literally killed during the Passover. It was bad. People died. People who are very much willing to let the Israelites go had no say. All because Pharaoh wouldn't let them go. They died. There was drought, there was hunger, there was starvation. They died. Yeah, very loving, very caring of God. Don't you think that he would do all that for the Israelites? Yeah, no. Guys, he was trying to show us something all this while. There's a very big difference between what Christianity was, which was a religion, and what it is now, or what it is since Jesus died for us. Anyway, we'll be getting there. So now you may wonder, what's my issue here? In fact, before I even get to what my issue is, back then, the requirement for any sin that is committed is atonement by sacrificing something. We take note of atonement through sacrifice way back in the beginning when Adam and Eve sinned. An animal was slaughtered for the hides of the animal, the skin, to be covered on Adam and Eve. We focus a lot on the skin, but we discard the part that blood was shed. Blood is mercy. Blood speaks mercy. The blood of an animal, the atonement for sin, was very temporary and very fading, and it wasn't abundant. And from there on, the thing is, each time you'd sin, something or someone had to die, because the wages of sin was death. Whether you would pay your own wages or you'd put the life of an innocent animal on the stake, the wages of sin was death. And that was just how things was. And also, when the law was finally passed, when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they kept on saying how they are pissed that they cannot commune with this God, they don't know this God and all that, and how they want to be governed, and how they want to feel his presence. Yeah, no, shouldn't have done that. But anyway, besides, it was all a part of God's greater plan. The only reason why God gave the law, the only reason why God gave the law, is to show man that man is incapable of living up to the standard of God's law, God's statute, God's cutting point. That is the only reason that God gave the law. If really God wanted us to abide by this law, by all means, Why then did he not give it in the first place when Adam and Eve immediately sinned? Why? How then was there a gap between Adam and Eve and the children of Israel being in the wilderness? How then, ask yourself, why was there a gap? If you want to say Christianity is based on the entire law itself, how then was all that applicable only after all that else had happened? All this irrationality, all this death of people, God wanted to show a side of himself that was as a result of the fall, and a side that people would realize needed to be corrected, or needed to be made better, or needed to be alleviated. God wanted to prove a point, really, that you really don't want me like this, and I don't want to be like this either. But the only way you can realize that there is a problem and that it needs fixing is when you realize that you can't deal with this anymore. Only then will I bring a solution, and you'll appreciate the solution much more for the alleviation that it will bring you. So when you look at the blood of the fowl that was shed in the beginning, it was a sign of hope, and God was giving us a spoiler. When you look at the other numerous sacrifices God told his chosen servants to give to him, like after the flood and all, that was a spoiler. When you look at the Passover and the putting of blood there, and whatever it is that's supposed to befall you passes over, that was a spoiler. The Passover didn't follow what you did to deserve to be passed over. No, it didn't matter who's in the house. It didn't matter the contents of your meal bin. As long as you had that blood on your door, you'd be passed over. Now, these are spoilers that we as Christians should have taken note of, because they are applicable even today. They sent a bigger message. So then, that was religion. That was Christianity as a religion. And that wasn't the intention that God had for us. But he had to follow through with it anyway, because it was all part of his big plan. Well, the sad part that disheartens me today is that today, in modern times, not even modern times, after Jesus died, people still want to make Christianity about that regime. They are still operating in that regime. And that isn't supposed to be the case. It isn't. I will stress this point. The law came for you to realize that you really can't live up to God's standard, no matter how hard you try. Remember the rich young man that approached Jesus and said, "Master, I have done all that is required of me. What then am I lacking for me to enter the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus was like, so you think. Well, since you've observed everything, I tell you this simple thing. Go sell everything you have. Give it to the poor. Yeah, that hit a nerve. It really hit a nerve. Can't imagine. So then that means all else that he did, thinking he's following the law and fulfilling the law, was all in vain. All of that was in vain. Can we also then say some of us still practice the law in vain? I don't know. You be the judge of that. But anyway, we have wrapped up part 1. Yes, we have wrapped it up. As suspended as it is, don't mind that. We'll merge it, or we'll talk about the New Testament and how it is our ushering into a relationship, and we will merge where the two meet and how each part is necessary for the other. Necessity doesn't always mean applicability. It's not even a word. Applicability. Appliance. Application. So, I'll see you later on, where we'll tackle part 2. I'm still at work. Stay blessed.